Thank you for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, in September 2015, the United Nations adopted a set of Sustainable Development Goals as part of its agenda for the next 15 years. They were the most sweeping and ambitious program ever undertaken by a global organization, and also for the first time in its history, the United Nations has understood the importance of science in deliverable of the Sustainable Development Goals. If we look at SDG 2, SDG 2 targets ending hunger, achieve food security, and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and those in vulnerable situations. If we look at target 2.5, it goes further and points to a very important issue that, and I quote, by 2020, the genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, farmed and domesticated animals, and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at national, regional, and international level, and ensure access to and fair resources and associated traditional knowledge as internationally agreed. So it calls for research and food security, and I think food security sits at the nexus of climate change, sustainable practices, traditional knowledge, amongst many other interdisciplinary themes. Yet, we all know that food is culture, and food preferences are an integral part of cultural identity. Food is who we are 3 times a day for the fortunate few in the world, where over 800 million people go to bed hungry every day. And we know that us humans, we depend on plant diversity, both wild and cultivated. And this is a result of years of selection of crop varieties. It is a critical resource, not only to address sustainable agriculture, but for all of our ecosystemic needs. And when it comes to ecosystemic needs, one cannot forget that this is given to us free. And there has been a seminal work by Professor Das Gupta from Cambridge University. He has tried to put some value to this ecosystemic need that nature gives us for free. So if we are to increase the sustainable use of agricultural biodiversity in production and consumption system, it will be an important part of the solution to the challenge of meeting future food and nutrition security. So what we have to do is keep on increasing the sustainable use of agricultural biodiversity in production and consumption systems, as this will be an important part of the solution to the challenge of meeting future food and nutrition security. Yet, we know that we are pushing nature's life support system very far, and they are struggling to cope with our relentless demand. And if we do not work with nature's system, nature will fail to be the durable, continuously sustaining force that she has always been. And it is only by safeguarding nature's resilience that we can hope to have a resilient form of food production and ensure food security in the long term. So if you go back to 2005, when we had the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, that assessment identified 5 major direct drivers of biodiversity loss and ecosystem service changes, and they include habitat change, climate change, invasive alien species, overexploitation, and pollution. So what's happening is that the loss of crop genetic resources is already happening and may lead to the loss of options for improving agriculture. We know that agriculture and food production are complex, and they operate together to deliver those increased yields to meet society's multiple needs. However, are we creating a more sustainable approach to agriculture that is recognizing the social and economic parameters which are likely to impact feeding the world, with a global population rapidly heading for 9 billion? So as we can see, the growing problem at the global scale as yields for staple food crops are declining. They have dropped from 3% in the 1960s to 1% today, and for the first time, that rate is less than the rate of population growth. And the world has to find means of feeding over 200,000 new mouths every day, and COVID-19 has accentuated this crisis. With an estimated 1 billion people, 1/7 of the world population to feed, there's more than 1 billion suffering from hidden hunger. But how do we ensure a sustainable food production system? We need a form of agriculture that is inclusive of the diversity of crops. And we know that diversity provides resilience in farming systems. And I'll just give one example of how diversity matters to our agriculture. One local wheat variety collected in Turkey in 1948, initially of little interest, as it was tall, with a thin stem and susceptible to leaf rust and cold weather. It was later found to be resistant to several other pathogens, including stripe rust. So when stripe rust became a problem in northwestern United States, this little-known variety was included in major wheat breeding program. And here I have a special thought for what's going on in Svalbard, where there is a massive seed collection, and increasingly we will have to resort to seed collection to protect our food system and, of course, ensure our food security. So the genetic diversity in land races used in traditional agricultural production system constitute an important element for the livelihood strategies of farmers and confers resilience to agricultural production system. It is important for us to ensure that this diversity is maintained in such production system for evolutionary adaptation to environmental changes. But how do we bring the neglected and underutilized plant species and US call into the mainstream? They play an important role in food security, nutrition, health, income generation, and cultural practices. The neglected and underutilized species and US represent less than 20% of all accessions held in germplasm collections. They are at risk of cultural and genetic erosion. They are cultivated and used drawing on indigenous local knowledge. They are not well represented in gene banks. They are characterized by poor and inexistent local seed supplies and hence inaccessible. The conservation of these species matter not just for conservation's sake, but for our own food security. And when it comes to diversity, I cannot but go back to the International Year of Pulses and go back to the humble lentils, and again pay homage to the pioneering work of Professor van den Berg, who is now referred to as the godfather of lentil breeding, and his work is to be commended, and the results have been staggering for Canada. What he did, he managed to bring in the traits of the tough wild relatives growing in their centers of origin, the Middle East, into those of cultivated lentils. And the country is now a leading exporter in this commodity when lentils hardly grew there in the 1970s. And what has happened is that it is ensuring food security for millions of people across the world. We go to another target, Target 2.5, which talks about agro-biodiversity. Target 2.5 rightly focused on the efforts to conserve genetic diversity in situ facilities, in ex situ facilities, and reducing the extinction risk of local breeds as they are easy to measure. There is also a need to ensure that the diversity is also maintained in situ. So there is a call for the expansion and development of a form of agro-biodiversity index that encompasses different aspects of conservation and use linked to our food system, hence a complementary approach for both ex situ and in situ conservation strategies. So in conclusion, if we are serious about feeding a growing world population with sufficient nutritious food in times of a changing climate, we have no choice but to build on the biodiversity that nature and earlier generations has given us. For change to happen, we must act as one, from the farmers growing diverse crops, to the breeders using diversity to develop resilient crops, to the retailers providing more options on their shelves, to the consumers demanding more diverse, nutritious, sustainable foods. I would like to thank you for your attention.